Hello and thank you for joining us tonight on the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm your host Melina Weiskup, in for Steve Lance tonight. The Biden administration today declared monkeypox a public health emergency, with cases continuing to surge across the U.S.
As you all know, the monkeypox outbreak has evolved rapidly and uniquely from prior outbreaks. So we are in a different, it's a different dynamic than it was the last couple times, because monkeypox has been here in this country before. And so we have aggressively responded at different stages of this outbreak.
Since the first monkeypox case was identified in Boston this May, the U.S. has confirmed more than 6,600 cases in 48 states, Washington, D.C., and Puerto Rico. Taming down inflation. That's what a $700 billion bill claims to do, and with President Biden's backing now. But Republicans are trying to get a different message across, that it'll raise taxes and hurt the economy. NTD's Iris Tao has more.
Pass it. Pass it, get it to my desk, pass it for the American people.
Urging lawmakers to pass what's called the Inflation Reduction Act, President Biden, still in quarantine, touting it as the largest investment ever in clean energy, adding that it will lower costs.
We're going to invest $369 billion to address the climate crisis and bring down family energy bills by an average of $500 a year.
The package, introduced by Senate Democrats, would spend around $400 billion on fighting climate change and shifting to renewable energy. It also invests about $300 billion in deficit reduction. But while Democrats say
we're finally going to do something on the inflation front in a big way,
Republicans are slamming it as a reckless spending spree that will do just the opposite.
And in fact, it is the Inflation Increase Act.
The Democrats' plan is funded in part by a 15% minimum corporate tax, and Republicans say it would hurt factories and middle-class Americans.
If you're doing green energy, you're protected. But if you're producing nails, if you're producing bolts, if you're producing baby formula, if you're producing car parts, if you're producing lumber, your taxes are all going to go up.
But Biden, speaking virtually at a Thursday roundtable, says it's only asking big companies to pay their fair share.
No one earning less than $400,000 a year will pay a penny more in federal taxes, notwithstanding all these ads you see on television.
And now Senate Democrats are scrambling to push the package through the chamber under budget reconciliation rules, which would allow them to pass it without any Republican vote. But that's only if all 50 members of the Democratic caucus come on board. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
China fired multiple missiles into waters near Taiwan as part of a 4-day military exercise. This comes just one day after House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island. China's state television showed footage of multiple rounds of missiles being launched from ground positions. According to Beijing, the drills will last for at least the next 3 days until August 7th, covering 6 areas around Taiwan. Some of those areas overlap with parts of Taiwan's territorial waters. A total of 11 Dongfeng missiles landed in the waters northeast and southwest of the island as of 4 p.m. local time Thursday. That's according to Taiwan's defense ministry. Chinese state media said the exercises are the largest Beijing has ever conducted in the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan says it has increased its combat readiness, activating its defense systems. And here at home, the White House has denounced Beijing for using Pelosi's visit to impose military coercion on Taiwan.
We condemn these actions, which are irresponsible and at odds with our long-standing goal of maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait and in the region.
Senator Joni Ernst tweeted that Communist China cannot dictate where we go or who we talk to, saying that China's, quote, retaliatory measures need to be met with strong U.S. leadership to reinforce our rock-solid partnership with Taiwan. And to break this down for us and to get a closer look at the Chinese Communist Party's true intentions, we're happy to bring on the co-chair of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus, Congressman Steve Chabot. Congressman Chabot, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be with you.
So, having sat on the Taiwan Caucus for so many years, does the U.S. have a strong and clear strategic response to this sort of conflict between mainland China and Taiwan?
Well, I do wish that the administration had been a bit more united. You had the speaker and you had the president saying two different things about this trip. Irregardless, the fact is that it's the PRC, the Chinese Communist Party specifically, who has been wrong here and has been provocative, not Nancy Pelosi, not the president, and not Taiwan. And I think it's been a gross overreaction by President Xi to have his naval ships as well as planes incursions into Taiwan's airspace, cyber attacks, which occurred against Taiwan. These are what we call gray zone tactics, which are kind of the space between war and peace. They can be very dangerous, however, if miscalculations are made. And that's one reason that I think one thing we do need to change is something called strategic ambiguity, which is our policy right now. Ambiguity meaning that we keep China off balance a bit by they don't know if we would actually be there militarily or not with Taiwan if they acted. I prefer strategic clarity, where we make absolutely clear that the United States and our allies would stand with Taiwan if they did act militarily.
Now, speaking of showing unity and togetherness, this is clearly an issue that has brought both parties together here in Washington, D.C., Democrats and Republicans. We saw a number of Republicans supporting Speaker Pelosi's trip to Taiwan. It's also uniting countries across the Western Hemisphere. So I want to ask, Congressman, what do you think is the global consequences for China if they choose to continue escalating militarily or if they even choose to invade?
Well, in some ways, the PRC, China is acting like a rogue nation here. They're not acting like a responsible world leader. Theirs has been unprovoked activities which are damaging to the peace. These live fire missile drills, as well as other types of weapons. And some of that has been directed towards Japan, for example. That's just completely inappropriate. Each country has to make that decision on their own, and none of us want war. None of us want to have military hostilities. Peace is what we all ought to be looking for here. The United States, of course, has strong relations with a number of countries. In the Indo-Pacific, for example, there's something called the Quad, which is the United States, India, Australia, and Japan. And we've been working together very closely for a number of years now, and we have a lot of other allies in the region. The one thing that China has been successful in doing is uniting much of the rest of the world, especially those countries in their region, to be united against what China is doing.
You know, and speaking of Xi miscalculating, Xi Jinping, the Chinese Communist Party leader, miscalculating here and actually leading to much of the Western Hemisphere uniting on this issue. Some would say that since so many of the countries have united in condemning China's actions here, the Chinese Communist Party is actually isolating themselves. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think they are isolating themselves. I think their reaction here has been completely disproportionate to what they object to. They object to an American member of Congress going to Taiwan. Many of us do that, and there are many times the speaker has done that. It's a long tradition. She has every right to go there.
What is their purpose of escalating these tensions and flexing their military muscles towards Taiwan's now? What do you think the Chinese Communist Party's true intentions are here?
Well, I think long term, they want to be the premier power across the globe, not just in the Indo-Pacific region, which is what I think they want now, but ultimately they want to be the most powerful nation in the world. They want to replace the United States. And essentially, you would have a country who stands for freedom and opportunity replaced by an authoritarian government who basically wants to suppress freedom, not only within its own country, but throughout the world. So we can't let that happen. Ultimately, I don't think they're going to be successful in that, but we need to stand together to make sure that that doesn't happen.
All right. Thank you so much, Congressman Steve Chabot.
Thank you very much.
The Justice Department has charged 4 former and current police officers in connection with the death of Breonna Taylor.
Those alleged crimes include civil rights offenses, unlawful conspiracies, unconstitutional use of force, and obstruction offenses. The 4 defendants were charged through 2 separate indictments and 1 information. Breonna Taylor should be alive today.
U.S. Attorney Merrick Garland today announced federal charges against these 4 police officers. Taylor, a 26-year-old medical worker, was shot to death in her home on March 18th of 2020. Louisville officers knocked down her door while executing the search warrant. Taylor's boyfriend fired a shot that hit one of the officers as they came through the door. The officers fired back and some of the bullets struck Taylor. Now, 4 of those officers involved have been charged with violating Taylor's rights. One officer was also charged with a conspiracy and falsification of records, and another was charged with lying to investigators. United Launch Alliance's 5th mission of the year lifted off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. An Atlas V rocket carrying a missile warning satellite for the U.S. Space Force lifted off Thursday morning. The satellite and rocket safely separated. ULA has launched 152 times with 100% mission success.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.